Good morning, everybody. Pastor Steve here. Thank you for joining me for today's devotion. We are in the Old Testament book of Psalms, chapter 44. Psalm 44 in our Bible reading plan. I hope you've already read the chapter and written in your journal what God said to you. And if you haven't started that practice yet, let me encourage you. Read the chapter, and even if you don't totally understand all of it, that's okay. Read the chapter, and in a journal or a notebook or just on a piece of paper, what did God say to you? Is there a verse that stood out, a phrase that stood out, a word, a section? Maybe there was a theme, an idea that ran through the whole psalm, and it spoke to you in some way. What is God trying to teach you? What is God trying to show you about himself, about yourself, about life, about being a faithful disciple? Just write it down in your journal, and then maybe a one or two sentence prayer. How are you responding to what God is showing you? Now, Psalm 44, I mentioned previously that I love the transparency of the Psalms, how the authors, just show you what they're really dealing with and struggling with, the good and the bad, the beautiful and the ugly on the inside, and all of that. And this is another psalm that's like that. And this psalm in particular deals with the question of why. Why? Why does God allow servants, disciples who are faithful, who are obedient, who are living, a Christ-like life to suffer? He begins in the opening verses by just declaring that their forefathers, their ancestors, had told them about all God had done in bringing the Jewish people to the promised land and settling them there and removing the inhabitants, and that it wasn't the Jewish army that was successful. It was God who made all that happen. And so he talks about that in the opening three verses. And then he says in verses 4 and following, in their day, while they're having struggles with other nations and armies, God, we know that our army is not the answer. Our security is not in the strength of our military. It is in you. So look at what he says in verses 4 and following. He says, "You are my king, O God. Command victories for Jacob." Jacob being a way of referring to the nation of Israel. "Through you we will push back our adversaries. Through your name we will trample down those who rise up against us. For I will not trust in my bow, nor will my sword save me." God, our bow and arrow, our sword, our army, our military, it's not the answer. We need them, but that's not our security. It's you, God. You have saved us from our adversaries. You have put to shame those who hate us. In God we have boasted all day long, and we will give thanks to your name forever. So he's saying, God, we're doing it just like our forefathers did it. They knew, and they told us it wasn't because of their might and their military prowess. It was just God who gave us victory. And in Psalm 44, the author is saying, God, that's how we're doing it. It's you. We know that, we've got an army, but if we're going to be successful, God, it's you. It's you. Yet, in spite of that, God, we're losing. We're under siege. Verse 9, "Yet you have rejected us, brought us to dishonor, and do not go out with our armies." God, our armies go out to fight, but it's as though you're not even there helping. "You cause us to turn back from the adversary," to turn around and run back, to flee. And those who hate us have taken spoil for themselves. So as they defeat us, they take our stuff. You give us as sheep to be eaten and have scattered us among the nations. Lord, we're losing. We're trusting in you. We know our army's not capable. Our only hope is you. And God, yet we are still losing. And God, he says, it's not because we have all this gross sin in our lives. We don't. Dropping down to verse 17. He says, all this has come upon us, but we've not forgotten you. God, in the midst of all this hardship, we're not forgetting you. We have not dealt falsely with your covenant. Our heart has not turned back, and our steps have not deviated from your way. God, through all of these military defeats, we haven't turned on you or from you. We haven't given up on you at all. And yet we suffer. Verse 19, yet you have crushed us in a place of jackals and covered us with the shadow of death. God, we're not sinning. We're not turning from you. We're not abandoning you. We're trusting in you, and yet we're losing, God, to these other nations, and we're hurting. We're hurting. And he says, Lord, it would make some sense if there's all this great sin in our lives, and we know we can't hide sin from you, verses 20 and 21. If we had forgotten the name of our God or extended our hands to a strange God, in other words, idolatry, been unfaithful, would not God find this out? For he knows the secrets of the heart. God, we can't hide anything from you. You know we haven't done those things. But why? God, why are we losing? Why are we suffering? And the truth is, in Psalm 44, he doesn't give any answer. Doesn't explain why. What he does do is keep crying out to God. Crying out to God for help, crying out to God for his presence. Look at the last few verses, starting at verse 22. But for your sake, we are killed all day long. We are considered as sheep to be slaughtered. Arouse yourself, verse 23. Arouse yourself. Why do you sleep, O Lord? Awake. Do not reject us forever. Why do you hide your face and forget our affliction and our oppression? For our soul is sunk down into the dust. Our body cleaves to the earth. Rise up, be our help, and redeem us for the sake of your loving kindness. Again, he does not explain why. He keeps crying out to God. Are there any lessons in this for us? Yes. There will be times we understand why bad things happen. It's because we've sinned. It's because other people sin and we get caught in the crosshairs of that. But there's also going to be times we don't have an answer. There's no answer why we're suffering. But another lesson from here is, even when you don't have an answer, keep seeking God. Don't turn away. Don't give up. Keep seeking God. Keep seeking God. And another lesson is, it's okay to be honest with God. This psalmist is. Most of the psalmists are. So it's okay to be honest with God as long as it's coming from a place of faith, even in the midst of the questions and the fear and the whys, so long as that is, like we talked about earlier this week, simultaneously churning on the inside is faith and hope with questions and fear. So long as it's coming from a place of faith and faith is mixed in, it's okay to be honest with God. That's not the same as shaking your fist in the face of God and mocking God and insulting God. That's not the same thing. You are a child of God who's trying to emotionally get through what you're going through. It's so long as there's faith in there, it's okay. That's the word for today. God bless you. I'll see you tomorrow.